Do you sometimes wonder how you could truly have an impact when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? How do you know you are moving in the right direction when it comes to becoming a more inclusive individual? As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod brings topics such as ethnicity, genders, sexuality, or religion on the table. We talk about research and science, but also emotions, feelings, and vulnerability. We discuss allyship, advocacy, and privilege. But most importantly, we talk action. Because without action, we stay still. And when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, stillness is never the answer. Welcome to As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. It's not often that you have the chance to meet someone that brings such an amount of energy, passion, and experience. Esther O'Callaghan is one of these people, and my next guest on As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. From being the first female DJ and producer to own a specialist vinyl store in Manchester's Northern Quarter, to setting up an award-winning charity providing music workshops for disaffected young people, and now running a social impact tech platform, Esther has dedicated her life to tackling youth unemployment, resulting in hundreds of thousands of children and young people supported nationally across the UK and worldwide. This has resulted in countless awards. She is the youngest civilian to receive an OBE, has been named as Freeman of the City of London in 2019 and Barclays Woman of the Year Alumni in 2018-2019, amongst many other recognitions. She's the co-founder and CEO of Hundo, a platform that connects forward-thinking employers with Gen Z talent, 100% committed to ending youth unemployment, and is also involved as angel investor, advisory board member, non-executive director, executive chair, and many other roles for a number of startups, consultancies, and charities. Esther and I deep dive into the topic of youth, employment, and making the workplace more accessible to the younger generations in this latest episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Welcome to this episode of As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. I have the great pleasure to have Esther today. Esther, welcome. How are you doing?
Good. I'm actually feeling a little bit tired and jaded because I was DJing very late on a boat party for Amsterdam dance event last night. So
amazing. we can definitely look into that afterwards. But I definitely want to hear about it. That's for sure. Well, welcome to my podcast. Very happy to have you here. We've been speaking for a while, actually, so I'm glad that we're finally making it happen. It's amazing. And like probably a lot of other episodes, I want to start with asking you, what's your story?
So my story is I have spent the last 2 decades working in and around youth issues, and largely driven from my own background. I think that I sort of, like a lot of young people, grew up in quite difficult circumstances, and I felt very strongly that I've been given lots of opportunities to actually build, kind of from quite a low start point, and I have sort of, I guess, I don't know if there's a conscious decision. I think it's quite an unconscious decision to try to, I suppose, pay forward and support young people. So that's kind of what it's sort of the thread that seems to have gone like through my, it's always much easier when you're like older, you can look back and go, oh, there's like there is a thread. It doesn't feel like that at the time. But yeah, I think I've always been drawn to supporting causes that I care about, and where I think I can be useful and make a difference. So that's my story.
Amazing, amazing. And you'll tell us a little bit more, I think, about what you're doing now, actually, around that.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about, obviously, youth and specifically Gen Z as well, which
Hmm.
is at the heart of everything you do. And before we jump in, actually, in terms of what you do day in, day out, to support this group of people and this community, I wanted to dig a little bit into Gen Z specifically,
Yeah.
and in your opinion, I wanted to ask you what are the characteristics of Gen Z?
Yeah. So I feel slightly like I'm not qualified to comment because I'm clearly not a Gen Z. I actually asked our resident Gen Z to put together some of the notes, to answer this question, because I wanted to actually hear from her, kind of like how they would characterize themselves rather than what I think. I can talk about what I think, but yeah, I personally find them fascinating. Really, really fascinating generation. Extremely diverse, very proactive. I think that they're referred to quite a lot as the most sort of activist generation since the 60s. And I think the reason for that is you see a lot of the same. In the 60s, you were looking at sort of, Cold War, sort of beatniks, it's like post-war. And I think, with the kind of the big issues now, climate change, that they just seem to have, mental health, well-being, and they're kind of not prepared to put up with stuff in the way that my generation seems to have like just put up with things. And I think that's, yeah, they make me feel very hopeful, because I think that it feels like our responsibility to get out of the way and let them come through. And I think that, the generations that are before, I think that we have a huge responsibility to empower them, and to make it possible for them to actually empower themselves. Maybe they don't need our help, but I think if they don't need our help, then we just need to get out of the way. And I love working with them. They give me energy, they keep me inspired, because obviously the work that I do, obviously Hundo.careers is all about supporting young people into employment. And when I get to talk to people like Josh Akapo, Timothy Armu, some of the real, I'm really inspired by them. So I feel that they make me feel hopeful for the future, when I think sometimes if you looked at the news and you just constantly read about everything that's wrong, you can get quite disheartened. And I actually find them really, really inspiring.
It's interesting you're saying that. I was watching a video the other day, and it was I think it was definitely a school in the US that I think had not necessarily banned, but was looking into putting aside some books. Specifically, it was, I think, around race at that point, and some of these young people were being interviewed about what they thought about it. And what I loved about that video is that passion that they had about, well, we're going to take it personally. I remember my generation, probably same as yours. I would, in my head, the picture I had was I could see my parents going to complain about something like this, while in that video was really them saying, we understand the issues, we understand the struggles and the challenges, and we want to fight for it ourselves. We're not going to let someone else do it for us.
I think that's really true. And it's on that point, it's just that you said something really interesting. It is that they are, I guess, if you look at so I'm like that micro generation, between Gen X and and millennials, and I think we're called Zennials. I was like, anyway, but it's like but I remember, because I grew up in an analog world, but also fully integrated into digital. But for me, it's going like, your reference points, when we were growing up, was like Google wasn't there, all of this, and I do feel like it's kind of going, they have access to information all of the time, in real time globally in a way that we didn't have growing up. And I think that really puts a perspective. Some of the things I've really loved seeing, particularly with social media and in all of its toxicity, is kind of Gen Z having this kind of like no filter, you know, sort of showing up as you are, you know, stuff like that. I think is really important, you know, because it creates, when you look at mental health and well-being, you know, some of this stuff creates so many problems for young people, and that's a real area of concern for me. And I do like the fact that they're just pushing back on it in the way that they can. I think that's really important.
And as you said, it's our responsibility, I think, to support them in that and give them the space to be able to do it.
Yeah,
completely.
definitely.
So you mentioned about a generation that is diverse, and just now as well you talked about being who you are. So in your opinion, what does diversity and inclusion mean to this generation, to the Gen Z?
Well, I asked them. Some of the stuff that came out was critical factors for them about whether they will join a company or not. So, and obviously in terms of work we do, that's super important, that they want to feel included, see themselves represented in all companies. And I think, again, that for us, it's kind of going, you can't achieve tick box diversity and inclusion. It's like if young people go into a business and they don't see role models and people that they can relate to, then they won't stay, you know. That's not an environment for them. That's really clear when they talk to us, and they want to be accepted for who they are, and not have to act as someone else to fit in. And I don't think that's like Gen Z specific. I think probably all, you know, my experience of the young people that I've worked with, that's a general feeling. I think, as we talked about earlier, I think they're just much more direct about that. They want companies to change how they're hiring. Obviously, that's why we exist, trying to work that out, and look at skills and culture and community rather than just academic achievements, which is obviously, you know, I'm fully on board with that. Definitely want to see more inclusion, diversity, particularly in industries like tech, and more companies hiring women. And they want to be able to grow within a business. Some of the most fun things that I see on LinkedIn is all the kind of like entry-level roles, you know, when employers want like 5 years experience, you know, and a degree, you know, all the memes and the kind of, you know, some of the pithy comments. And I think it's not about being, you know, we don't want to pitch older employers, you know, against this generation. It's just going like, I think if you build a culture within a business that is Gen Z friendly or youth friendly, it's good for everybody. I think that about most things. If you design places and spaces with children and young people at the heart of it, they're better for all of us. So those are some of the main takeouts from when I asked.
Very, very interesting. And I think it especially with the part about you mentioned about belonging and not having to fit in. As you said, I think it is across generations, but I think maybe our generation, maybe the generation before, actually even more, it's almost like we were in a mold where it was more important to fit in, because I think it was harder actually to not fit in. And I'm glad that we see things that are changing where the newer generations maybe obviously rightfully demanded, but with the hope as well that that they don't have to fight for it as much, maybe as some other people. I had a great person on the previous episode. She calls herself the only, because she had throughout her whole career, she was either the only Black person or the only woman, or often the only Black woman, and it's much harder suddenly when you're the only one not to fit in. And I think creating that diversity now will hopefully help that generation.
And it is interesting because I grew up in a seaside town in the north of England, and my grandma was Sri Lankan, And she was quite famous in the town because she was the only Asian lady in the whole town. But we experienced a very weird kind of racism, and sort of I kind of grew up with that, and it's. And that, that word that we use, about fighting, it's like, I don't want this generation to have to fight for what they should just, that should just be human rights, that, just basic human rights to be treated in a human way. And I do think that it is interesting to me because, we did have to fight to not fit. I didn't fit in. I've never fitted in anywhere. It's kind of I was sort of like even just very simple things like I'm left-handed. We're an extreme minority, in the world, and you have sort of like learning difficulties. I was brought up in a sort of a niche, kind of religious background, so I was always on the outside, always felt like an outsider actually, and I think what I like about particularly some of the work that we've done with Hundo is our stories. When I look at our website with all the stories, it's such an eclectic mix of everybody, and I'm like, don't we want the world to look like that? Like what? Like why do we want it to all look uniform and the same? I find that like I kind of go like, why? Like we all love color, we all love music, we all love art. It's like it's just kind of. Can't we celebrate the richness of what diversity means, rather than trying to pigeonhole everybody and put us all into different buckets and molds that maybe we just I don't even know why that happens. I don't know when that's started, and I do like this generation in terms of going, the more that we can almost like infuse companies with this new attitude and new approach. I think it's not just like it's not like just a soft sort of intangible woolly thing. The statistics like bear out now. It's like going, diverse companies are more profitable. Their customers are more loyal. It's kind of going, isn't that great that we can have all of this kind of like richness, and it's actually improving your bottom line if that's what you care about. I think that's I'm quite happy to sort of see that bearing out. The same with female-led companies. They are profitable, they are successful, there are compelling reasons on every level to kind of really let this generation sort of make that new world.
Yeah, and it's interesting you're talking about those benefits and the research that is behind. Indeed, there is a lot out there we can read about when it comes to why a more diverse and inclusive organization benefits from it. And what I found fascinating about this is there are so many benefits that every company can find something that can truly motivate them to say, actually, it makes sense completely for me to do it. Why am I not doing it yet? Or why am I not pushing it even more? Because from indeed the profits to the way people feel in the company to the performance, to there is a benefit for everyone somehow.
It's just a very different. I think it's people are usually defensive and resistant to change because they're scared, and also overwhelmed. When I look at like what HR directors and hiring managers and line managers have to do in a day, it's a lot. And then when you're kind of coming up and going like, oh, and by the way, we now need to do all of this stuff as well on top of everything else that was already on your desk. I can totally see, when we talk to employers about, let's get more young people into your business because it's good for your business, but you are asking them to do something different in a different way, and that can feel scary. And I think that's what I see on both sides is kind of there's a kind of a fear on the side of young people, because it's like, going into a business for the first time or going to an interview for the first time, it's daunting. And then on the other side, kind of HR, people going like, Gen Z isn't their only age group, that they're working with, and what we've tried to do, with Hundo is go like, we're an ally, to both. We're here to make it easier, we're here to make the whole process engaging and hopefully fun. and because for us, it's kind of going, if you can, one of the biggest issues is that young people go into work and then leave. for all range of issues. And what we do is try to prevent that from happening by sort of making sure that employers have a much more Gen Z friendly presence on the Hundo platform. So there is a kind of a cultural discovery, piece, and then kind of working once young people are kind of in the business, that they can still come back to us if they've got problems, and it means that we can kind of sort problems out that normally would lead to young people just walking away from the business, which is bad for everybody. It means that we can actually support them and keep them there, which is much better.
Well, let's dig a little bit more into what you're doing with Hundo, and I don't know if you call it your strapline or your mission, and solving youth unemployment and boosting ED&I at scale. I love that. So tell us a little bit more about how do you pursue this purpose? I think maybe purpose is the right word for.
Yeah. I kind of, as I said earlier, I spent kind of 2 decades working in and around youth issues, from some of the really hard stuff like homelessness, young male suicide prevention, bereavement, self-harm, and for me, Hundo is really it's the kind of product of my life's work and experience, and I realised a few years ago that if we continue to sort of put young people into the sort of charity box, it's like, or the CSR box, or even to an extent, the D&I box, it doesn't, it's not really helping in terms of going, you want businesses to see young people as an investment that they're making, rather than doing a nice thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's more about going like, I've never met a young person who wants to be considered like a charity case, if that makes sense. So I think we decided to go down the route of building a social impact business, and we offer essentially, we're an edtech HR tech platform. So it means that young people, where youth and employment problems start is actually if you go all the way back, child poverty, is the real kicker, because if you grew up on free school meals like me, you're 3 times more likely to be unemployed. So there's a real kind of equality divide that starts right back, from your background. And of course, none of us get to choose where we're born. And then for me, then you go into education, and the education system is simply not fit for purpose anymore when it comes to skills needed for the future of work, because the jobs market and the hiring, has changed so rapidly. And that's not to diminish the work of great teachers, because there are a lot. And the ones that I speak to, they are not only aware of this, they really, really want to be part of solving it. So for us, we wanted to kind of go, okay, fine, every young person has to be in education by law. Can't do anything about that. Education system can't just change like that, but what we can do is partner with education training providers, and it means that young people can join the Hundo platform, and they can start to augment their learning by looking at, these are the careers, these are the jobs, these are the things that you can do, these are the things you can start to think about that you might be interested in. And it means that a young person can start their career journey from work experience all the way through to full-time work, and that whole entry-level life cycle, work experience, paid internship, temporary work, so, if that's what young people need, apprenticeships, that whole sort of range of things that young people can do, rather than what happens at the moment, where young people leave school or education, and then there's just this hiring, so then it's going like, wow, and it's kind of, it's just very dysfunctional when you think of it in that way. So for us, we wanted to go, you can start with the Hundo, platform while you're still in education. It will help you make better educational choices based on the future of work. Yes. And instead of, my work experience was in a care home, in a residential nursing home, because I grew up in Blackpool, and it's kind of lots of retired people, so it was like care homes or tourism. There's so many careers in the world that I would have loved to have done work experience in, and it just wasn't even just wasn't even an option. And that's kind of what I want Hundo to, if you want to work in health and social care, fantastic. We'll support you with that. But actually, if you want to work in gaming or tech or cybersecurity, here's the roadmap. Here's what you can start to do. And I think that's what we're building. We're obviously at a very early stage. And then on the other side with employers, we listened to them. We looked at their pain points. And we worked all up and down the country with them, all different types of businesses, to go, why are you struggling to attract, retain, and advance young people through your business? Where are these pain points? And then we designed the Hundo platform to meet those pain points and to solve them. So we built a career collab, which is a collaboration with an employer. So what they do is they sign up for a career collab with us. We do a scorecard, which it's not like TripAdvisor. It's like it's private to the company. But we basically asked Gen Z for their feedback. What do they think of the website? What do they think of the socials? Would they consider that they were eligible for a job in that business? Because 90% of the young people we've worked with didn't believe they were eligible for the jobs and employers they now work for. All that talent that you're missing out on as an employer, that's why I'm like you're missing out. If 90% don't even think that you would consider them for a job, that's crazy. So the scorecard gives us like a real rich insight into what the audience that employers are trying to attract, where they're kind of going wrong. And it's interesting because even some really, really good, what you'd call like cool businesses, when you go to the careers page, it just kind of bounces to that kind of awful job board, and it's like, and the language, like things like, KPIs and OKRs and like OTE and all this. It's like, what does it mean? Like, because there's no kind of like course at school that goes, here's the glossary of terms that you're going to need to learn to understand,
Indeed.
And even things like very nuanced things like calling jobs in the UK market blue collar and white collar. Blue collar jobs. But if for a start it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's like, what does that even mean? But to young people's parents and grandparents, blue collar jobs are considered less valuable than white collar. So it has a real impact in terms of like, if a young person wanted to go into blue collar industry, they might be put off by that, or by the family going like, why are you doing that? So there's some real nuanced stuff that goes on, and we think that's really important because you need to know where the blind spots are. You need to know where the biases are. If your website is beautiful and brilliant, but it's all white people, you're immediately making it. You're immediately putting an unconscious barrier there for more diverse candidates. So those are some of the things that we do with the scorecard. And then when we have the feedback, we then take all of that and we work with the employer to build their launchpad page on the Hundo platform. And that's where effectively it's a Gen Z friendly place to go and look at jobs and careers. Video content obviously is huge. And most importantly, it's about, these are the real hours, this is what you really earn. These are the kind of the benefits and things that happen in the business. And most importantly, here are some younger people in the business who might be a little bit older than you, but they're in the business telling you about what it's like, and that really, really helps to start to kind of go, is this the right, not just the right industry, is this the right company for me? Because even within an industry, businesses are very, very different, and not everybody fits everywhere, and that's okay. And then obviously the final bit that we do is the hiring piece. And that means that instead of what happens now with like contingent recruitment and job boards and CVs, it means that you've got this really coherent pathway. And there's been lots of contact points before young people are even thinking about, and now I want a full-time job. And for employers, it means that they can move away from reactive replacement contingent hiring into, we want to create a consistent systemic pipeline of diverse talent that we're growing through the ranks, and home growing. And then, hopefully, not everybody will stay forever. But for us, what we do know is, so far, 84% of the young people who've gone through our process are still in work 12 months later. So that that's kind of the metric that matters.
Yes.
Because it's one thing to get a job. Getting a job in many ways is not so easy, but it's easier than kind of sustaining employment. And actually, that's if you're really going to tackle the problem that I care most about, which is, can we empower young people to lift themselves out of poverty? You need at least 12 months, to stabilize your rent payments, to be able to pay your bills. It sounds very, very basic, but if you lose your job or you've walked out because you faced a microaggression or just out and out racist comment, or whatever happened, whatever happened in the business that day that made you feel like you couldn't go back, that's where the poverty cycle kicks in real quick. Because if you lose your job, you can't just automatically sign on for welfare. There's a gap. It means that young people can very quickly go from stability to homeless. And in the UK particularly, for the first time ever, the homeless population is mostly young people. You have to have paid work as a basis from which to build the rest of your life. Without that, it's really, really difficult. And so that's why we exist. That's our purpose, and that's how we're working to solve it.
And that's a really, really nice purpose. What I love in listening to you talking about it is how it at the heart is really, what are the needs of these different groups of people, whether we talk about the Gen Z and the young people, or you talk about the organization. It's about, what is it that you really need, and how are we going to help you come up with solutions, rather than just, let's point at the problems and then just go ahead and do what you have to do. You're really offering them that support in on both sides to be able to meet in the middle and say, now we fit with each other, and we can really get together and move forward on some of these social issues. And
and it's also it's ultimately it's a human-centric experience. We are a tech-enabled platform, because that gets rid of the automation that helps get rid of a lot of inefficiency in the whole process. But fundamentally, in the end, humans working with humans. And I for me, with hiring managers, with early talent managers, it's kind of going, all you really need to think, we don't need to think about like Gen Z as this like nebulous thing. And it's like, it's more that thing of going, my son is Gen Z, he's 17, it's like, so it's kind of going, you can think about who do we go to work with? We go to work with nephews, nieces, aunties, uncles, mums, dads, it's like what, and I kind of go, I think it's that sort of, that's the shift that I would love to see. And I think it will take a while. But it's kind of going like, we're not factory, we're not like 1930s factory workers, in terms of going like, we don't have this like clock in, clock out, go home. It's going, we all spend most of our lives at work. Why does it have to be so sort of disjointed from all of the other things that we love and all of the other things that we are as people? And I say that as we Piers and myself, my co-founder, we've gone from being just the two of us to like a team of 10 going into 12 now. And it's kind of like, you have to have processes and you have to have policies and procedures, but honestly, it's like we're a team. Every business is surely a team that's kind of wanting to kind of succeed in whatever it is that they're doing. And I really hope that with the work that we do, even if it takes the next 20, 30 years, that ultimately we can kind of look back and go that there was a moment, and I think COVID has accelerated this massively, in terms of going, we actually were able to build the spaces and places and cultures that we would actually like to get up and go to work in every day. I think more people will stay in work, with employers. I think there'll be less sick days, and I'm not saying this as if it's like just things I've thought of. Research is there for that. If people feel more supported, whether it's when they come out, or if they have, mental health issues or whatever it is, I think companies will do better. And I think trying to sort of gently move away from that old school thinking, because even old school people are grandparents, you know, and they got families, and it's like just trying to create that condition is certainly what we're trying to build as a business ourselves.
It's interesting what you mentioned here, and I think I thought about it as well when you were talking about having videos of people that are people they can relate to within the companies. And there is an amazing piece of research around that, where we have, as human beings, we have the tendency to talk about what we do, our skills. We introduce ourselves by giving our job title first, and our qualifications and so on. While actually the person on the other side, research has shown that to be able for me to trust you, for example, I need to know who you are first rather than what you do. But naturally we do it the wrong way around. And I think creating those stories, I think is what creates that trust, and ultimately that trust creates that sense of belonging, that sense of being included, and being part of that bigger family.
And it's also, you know, the one place where this happens really well is football academies. You know, sports academies is kind of that there is a formula for this that exists, you know. So but that's what we'd like to build.
That's amazing to hear that. And so obviously one very obvious one would be to get in touch with you and work with you, but otherwise, what are some of the actions that organizations can take or should take to be more inclusive of Generation Z, young people, or in general, actually, if you have any thoughts on that?
I think I come back to the same word. It's fear. You know, like, don't fear change, and don't fear saying the wrong thing. You know, like, saying the wrong thing is kind of like better than saying nothing at all, you know, or sort of being afraid to you know, talk about issues, you know, whether it's whatever it is, whether it's Black Lives Matter, or whether it's Me Too, or whether it's mental health, or, you know, whatever the issues are, it's kind of like face them, you know, and bring people into the room, you know, who actually know this stuff. You know, lived experience, hugely valuable. It's like sitting in a boardroom in the city with people who all went to the same kind of school and all went to, I've never seen like change achieved in sort of like when we're all in this kind of like binary mode, you know, and it like, don't mind being challenged. You know, there's nothing wrong with it's not judgment. It's not wrong to say that's probably not a good idea. You know, it's, you know, that kind of I think mostly like, don't fear it, and bring in experts and people with lived experience, because then you can really build something that is meaningful and tangible, rather than kind of like going, oh, there's been this like big campaign, quick, we need to hire some, you know, people from this community. It's like going, that's not what people from those communities want either. You know, people want to be I say it like sweeping statement, people that I have worked with and speak to and know, and myself included, you know, it's like, I don't want to be on a board because I come from you know, a sort of Sri Lankan heritage and I'm female. I'd like to be there because I've got skills, you know, and I think that's the I think those are the sorts of things that I'd like companies to think about. And with young people, don't be scared of them. It's kind of like they're great fun to work with, you know. I think for me, it's like that's why when we, you know, some of our employers who were, some of them were, you know, quite sort of like cautious and a bit like, oh, you know, is this going to work for us? You know, they've turned around a year later and said, like, you know, these young people are some of the best hires they've ever made. And they'd never have found them. And it's kind of going, isn't that sad? You know, that there's all, you know, it's like there's all these companies who could be working with young people from all backgrounds, you know, all walks of life, and could turn out to be like some of the best members of the team that they've ever had. And that's not that, that won't be true for everybody. We're not going to have 100% success, nothing ever does. But I think I'll take 84. 84% is a good start for me.
That's a pretty impressive number. Definitely. I mean, that's definitely a good place to start. But thank you very much for all these thoughts. As a last question, I want to ask you, what is one thing that you would want to leave us with?
It's going to take all of us to tackle youth unemployment. It's going to take everybody pulling together. And for employers particularly, I would really ask them to, kind of partner with us on that basis. Yes, all of the ROI, yes, all of the metrics, but honestly, if we all get together on this, we can solve it. And I think that's I'd love employers to be part of this solution.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I do have one last question, though, which is a much easier one probably than this one, but it was a beautiful answer you shared. And it's if anybody wants to reach out to you and connect, what's the best way to do it?
So you can obviously LinkedIn, and it's just Esther at hundo.careers.
Brilliant. Esther, thank you so much for
Pleasure.
Being part of this episode. I learned so much. It actually made me realize that I don't have a lot of Gen Z people around me. I have younger
you need to work
kids.
With Hundo.
Yes, exactly. I was thinking I have my generation Alpha at home with my younger kids.
Yeah.
But in the middle, I mean, I have obviously a few with my brothers and sisters, but I think I need to go out and connect even more with
my favorite thing, which will be my final thought because it's amazing, is our Scott, who's our chief product officer, talking about Gen A, because obviously the intention is that Hundo isn't just for Gen Z, it will be hopefully future generations coming up. And so he asked his son, who's a Gen A, what he thought of the Hundo website. And he said it was a stinky website because it has no dinosaurs on it. So even we don't get it right all the time.
Brilliant. I'll do the same. I'll show it to my daughters and I'll send you the feedback. Well, once again, thank you so much for being part of this podcast and of this episode. And definitely follow you closely on social media and through your website as well. And looking forward to the next steps in your journey.
Thanks, Julian.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. We'd love to hear from you. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube at As Diverse as Two Peas in a Pod. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.